scripture reading this morning is taken from John chapter 3 and verse 3. John 3:3. And it reads, Jesus answered and said to him, Most assuredly I say unto you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Our brother Matteo Aggabao is coming to us from Laurelbrook Academy, and I learned this morning, as I just met him and his wife back there, that he was a teacher in Guam and was teacher to my brother-in-law who lives in Collegedale. And so that was a really neat surprise. And so I messaged my brother-in-law and told him that he's here. And he said, oh, wow. He said, please tell them I said hi. And so we're just grateful that Brother Matteo and his wife are here with us this morning. And we just pray that the Lord will bless the message that he brings. Taisha will be sharing a special music with us. And then Brother Matteo will be coming up after that.
Happy Sabbath, church. Lord, I want to be a Christian in my heart, in my heart. Lord, I want to be a Christian in my heart. Lord, I want to be a Christian in my heart. Lord, I want to be more loving in my heart, in my heart. Lord, I want to be more loving in my heart, in my heart, in my heart. Lord, I want to be more loving in my heart. Lord, I want to be like Jesus in my heart, in my heart. Lord, I want to be like Jesus in my heart, in my heart, in my heart. Lord, I want to be like Jesus. Lord, I want to be more loving. Lord, I want to be a Christian.
Thank you, Tisha, for that music rendition. My wife and I are glad to be here today. We've been extended to us by Brother Rodney. I think he's a member of this church, right? And he said that he will be gone, so he asked me to be here today. So it's a privilege. That's a beautiful church. First time to be around this Pikeville church. I cannot compare because I've not seen the original one. But I believe this is one of the most beautiful churches around here in Cumberland. So it's such a small world, and with Fred and Jane, they're quiet just a little bit when we got here. And it brought memories. My wife and I, we left the Philippines. Originally, we are from the Philippines. We left 1977. We got a call to serve the former Far Eastern Division. How many of you on a younger age here remembered Far Eastern Division? And it's now replaced by Southern Asia Pacific Division. So we were there. We were supposed to only be there for 3 years, but we ended up serving Guam Micronesia Mission for 27 years, from 1977 to 2004. First, we were in the island of Palau. We were at our school, Palau Mission Academy, for 13 years, and then 14 years on the island of Guam, and that's where I met the brother-in-law of Fred. That's a beautiful experience being on the island. So we left, and we went to Florida. So we're currently really Floridians. And so some of you are wondering, how did we find ourselves here in Laurel Brook? That by itself is another God's leading. You see, we were also on our retirement. We could not afford to be sitting down. So we find ourselves even busier. And in 2013, we find ourselves helping the health center in Moldova. How many of you are familiar where Moldova is? It's between Ukraine and Romania. So I've been in the country of Pastor Servan. So we have been doing that since 2013. And somehow COVID came in 2020, and we just got back from Moldova in December, and by January we could not travel. It was all closed down. So we have been in Florida 2020, and somehow our director of our health center in our church, which I have been, by the way, my wife and I have been helping also 2 churches there when we are there, and I've been leading also as a program coordinator for our health programs. For the CHIP program, how many of you have heard of the CHIP program of Hansdale? CHIP, and of course I got a little training also to lead the program, the DARP, Depression Anxiety Recovery Program. We got a little training from that in Weimar. So that's quite a good experience. But anyway, when we went to Moldova in 2013, I had to relinquish that responsibility. So what happened was that I found myself, we are here now in Laurel Brook as volunteers. We actually, our medical doctor was telling me, Matt, I would like to go to that Laurel Brook because they have a nursing home. And I'm retiring in 2 years. That was in 2020. And so he asked me, because he can't really drive a long distance drive, so I was a designated driver. So I found myself with a group over at Laurel Brook Academy on June 29. That was in 2020. On the context of just seeing Laurel Brook, and then we will be able to visit also Wildwood. So when we got to Laurel Brook on that Monday, we have lunch together with one of the residents there, Maudie, and her husband, Roger. And the President Warren was there, and he wants to talk to us for the reason of being here in Laurel Brook. Anyway, to shorten the story, he told us that his current need was not really a doctor, because the doctor is retiring in 2 years. He said what he needed was a social science instructor. It's happened to be a little part of my my experience. And so Mr. Warren asked me to help and teach on the context for 1 school year. And I agreed on that for 1 school year. So that was August, started school, 2020, on the context of finishing that year. But when the year was over, they did not find any teacher. So I've been asked to return. So anyway, we are still there right now. But on summertime, we go to Moldova. So we have these activities that keeps us going. And just like what the doctor says, one of the things that you can keep yourself young is keep busy. It's no time to really kind of sit down. And I will tell you, those of you who are planning to retire, really, it's going to be really exciting, because that's the busiest time of your life. When you retire, you just put new tires and it will run more mileage. Yes, I assume the doctor is smiling there, but how long have you been retired, doctor? So there's no retirement. And so for those of you who are in the younger generation, I don't think you're happy to hear that from me. But it's really exciting, especially when you are doing the Lord's work. And I'll tell you that there is no other place. Now, you notice that somehow, just for the sake of title, okay? Now, I didn't realize that, this is like, the title for this message today is, What is Your Spiritual Quotient? Now, all of us have been pretty much in school. We know IQ, right? Intelligence quotient. You guys have your score for that. And then, later on, I heard about the EQ, which is the emotional quotient. I learned that in Weimar, by the way. Dr. Nedley. And I was like, wow, emotional. And so when I was preparing this message today, I said, this kind of title, it's just good to put it there, just to have a bearing of where we will be in our message. But don't you know that from the very beginning you entered here and you have your Sabbath school, everything, even the story, when in fact that story that's been related, that's all part of what you call spiritual quotient, right in that very ballpark. So where are you in your spiritual journey right now? If there will be some kind of a grade given, what is your score? And of course, some of you say, well, we don't really have a way of putting the score of our spiritual quotient. But let me tell you something. Only God knows the score. But you and I have also our what? Our part. In fact, our verse today, I took that because you see, Nicodemus, he considered himself as an intellectual. And you are aware of the fact that during their time, there are two groups there. The Sanhedrin, they have the Sadducees and the Pharisees. The Sadducees, of course, are the aristocrats. And of course, the selection of the Pharisees are from the general population. So anyway, they are members of this tribunal, if you will say, among the group of these intellectuals in Jerusalem. So here is Nicodemus. And of course, Nicodemus has been he really a learned man, very intelligent guy. And somehow he was concerned. He noticed that somehow when this new teacher came, there were just some things that he noticed quite different from all the other teachings that he heard. In fact, the final, just before the interview, one of the attraction was during the market experience of Jesus. Remember when he went to the marketplace? Actually, it's not a marketplace. It's actually in the sanctuary, and the sanctuary became outside like a marketplace. And you notice and you remember the story, right? Jesus went there supposedly in the context of worship, but he noticed that most of the people were using this place as a place where they could earn money. It's a business place. So it was quite a noisy place. Now, Nicodemus happened to be there that very day when Jesus turned the tables, and, he saw Jesus with that kind of, with that motion with the wheat. Now, in his mind, something is really special about this man. And as we have seen the story here, he literally would like to speak to this man. In his own calculation, he would like to do some personal interview. But he got his surprise. So let's just go back there a little bit, because I'd like also to quickly mention another intelligent person a little later here. So on chapter 3 of John, it says here from the first verse, there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. And verse 2 says, this man came to Jesus by night and said to him. Now this is something that, in their way of looking at these things as a leader, they don't usually just address a person just by name. So here, he came by night and he addressed Jesus as Rabbi. And Rabbi, of course, you know already, it implies being a teacher. We know that you are a teacher come from God. For no one can do these signs that you do unless God is with him. So he's trying to just make a little bit of a way of conversation to get involved with an interview, personal interview. But you see, Jesus knows exactly what is happening here. He could read the mind. And this is the most beautiful part, which Nicodemus did not know. Jesus could read what is in his mind. And he knows that this man is going to be a potential teacher. So he made it a direct answer to this, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher from God, for no one can do these signs, all these miracles. But then Jesus answered to him, and this is a punchline that Nicodemus did not expect. Jesus answered and said to him, most assuredly I say to you. Now this is emphatic now. Unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Now you see, for Nicodemus, this illustration of birth, somehow he noticed that this is only possible for those who are going to join. In his own calculation, birth or rebirth in a spiritual context is from those Gentiles who is going to join the Jewish economy. They got to be born again. So to him, this question or this statement is really seemingly an insult. Because you see, he considered himself as a religious man. But Jesus directly told him, I say unto you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. So here God can see or could even measure the intelligence or spiritual intelligence of this person. He was not really in line. So Jesus has to make it clear. The measurement is what? You must be born again. So somehow Nicodemus got upset. He was trying to keep this for himself, but he could not. But then he asked this question, how can this be possible? In verse 4, how can a man be born when he is old? I mean, this is, come on. He should be an intelligent person, right? But to him, that question is an insult. But for Jesus, it was a question. It's almost like checking how intelligent he is spiritually. So if you notice here, this conversation obviously is giving a picture here that Nicodemus really is almost zero in his spiritual journey. But he thought he was already in that level where, he has been doing all of this. He's a moneyed guy. He gave all his offering and every good things possible. Now, this is something that you and I have to consider for ourselves. Really, how is our spiritual quotient, if there is a score? I like the lesson that we have for this quarter. And what was mentioned here today, there's something that we need all the time. And that key word is remember. In fact, right here on this, as I was reading, portion here of this quotation from Ellen G. White, we have nothing to fear for the future, except as we shall forget the way the Lord has led us in his teaching in our past history. And I know that all of us here have some form of stories that we remember how the Lord has been leading. In fact, that has been mentioned here today. There are some testimonies. And I already shared a little bit of what our experience working, supposedly doing the Lord's work in a mission. We accepted the call in 1977. By 1979, as I mentioned just briefly, we were expecting our first baby. The baby came out dead, baby girl. On top of that, there was a little insult on that. God put a little rub on that. You know why? Because we were in a boarding school. Shortly after the death of our baby, a week later, one of our students in the girls' dorm, we didn't even know that she was pregnant. She delivered a baby boy. When in fact we were told that she has been trying to abort that baby. Listen to this now. She has been trying to abort that baby to make sure that nobody knows that she was pregnant. And guess what? The baby was born healthy. Now, what do you think was the question that came to our mind? Why? Correct? And by the way, we were privileged to see this boy grow, and we were privileged to have him as a student. But let me tell you, God put things along the way, just like happened to Nicodemus. Maybe in the form of question for Nicodemus. Maybe for us, it was a point where, death, first death in our family. Of all things, it was Sabbath day. Fast forward today, I could talk freely about it, and we praise the Lord. But there's still one thing that God is telling us. You and your wife have to be faithful. You want to see your baby? You have to stay faithful. So this message that we have here, our spiritual quotient, how is it? In other words, the experience that the Lord allows us each day really is a token. It's a token given to us so that we will continue to grow in grace. When in fact, let me share what Ellen G. White mentioned quickly here. You know this very well, the quotation that's been very much in the, Steps to Christ. The quotation goes this way, that consecrate yourself to God by surrendering your plans and allow him to use you for that day. And by the way, consecrate your life first thing in the morning. When in fact, it says here, take me, O Lord, as wholly thine. I lay all my plans at thy feet. Use me today in thy service. Abide with me, and let my work be wrought in thee. Now, it means that each day, part of our journey, part of spiritual growth, if you please, we'll put that your quotient, is to surrender your plans first things first. Whether you are a retiree or you are just a newly, what you call a worker, surrender first things first in the morning. Your plans. And in fact, you will discover sometimes that your plans for the day, as you go through the day, sometimes it changes. And you will just like, what? You know, just like yesterday, I'm helping right now here at the Laurel Brook. Part of the thing that's assigned to me is to take patients to their appointments. And yesterday, I was told earlier that I had to go to Chattanooga and to give this patient, our resident, who has just had a heart part of surgery, to bring him home. And I was told that I should be there by 12, after 12. So I was on my way at 11:15. By 12, I should be able to get there. Guess what? I was just in Southern Daisy, and I got a call. Hey, you got to return. What? You got to return. The doctor says that the patient is not ready. See what I'm saying? There are things that you already plan. You know, you're on the move. You're already going, and suddenly what? The change. Have you been on a plane ride? Have you been there suddenly, you find yourself, and then the plane could not land, and you have to go back to where you come from? So near and yet so far. Have you been there? How do you feel? Oh, I have seen some of this, by the way. But you see, the plan that you have for the day is not necessarily going to be the best for you, because God knows what is really good for you. So in other words, part of this surrendering is really accepting His will. Be willing to accept God's plans, even if it means giving up and cherished projects. Now, going back to Nicodemus, he was not excited about this statement. And so the conversation went on. Jesus gave him even more illustration that when you accept me, it's almost like when you receive this salvation, it is almost like you don't really see it, but what? You can really feel it just like the wind. And so the question for you and me today really is, how is your spiritual journey right now? Where are you? Are you like Nicodemus, still questioning? You know, there are many times that we have that problem. We question the plans of the Lord in our lives. But God is putting this together for us. Remember, another person that we know, and just briefly here, remember Saul? His original actually named Saul, and he was later changed his name to Paul. What was he before he became a missionary? He was a persecutor, right? In his heart, in his mind, he was doing what is right. Because the teaching of this new way is not really the right one. But you know what Acts 9, chapter 9 says? God told him that it is what? It is hard to kick against the prick. It is hard to go against God's will. So this for us today, and I would like to continue here on this, that when we consecrate our life to the Lord, we need to truly surrender our plans. You know, my wife and I, we still have, we're still, right now, we are wondering like, wow, how long are we going to be here in Laurel Brook? Well, of course, we have plans to go to Moldova this summer. And I have actually, as I've told you, we have two churches we're helping there. There is some kind of being invited, why don't you come back now? And you know, all we could say, well, God will open the way and we will go back there. That's where we live. But right now, it's still here. And so some of us are like, just like, when am I supposed to move? When am I supposed to leave this place? We don't have to what? To worry about that. Submit everything to the Lord. Accepting His will. Trusting in Him. Your hope is not in yourself, but in Christ's strength and wisdom and might, which are united to your weakness and frailty. That is where we have to rely on. In fact, Jesus Himself said, part of His departing statement to the disciples in the book of John chapter 15. If you read that narrative, abide in me and I in you. For without me, you cannot do anything good. So, the measurement, or if we will put it this way, the way to measure our spiritual quotient is really how we relate to God every day when we are given that opportunity to be alive. So I would like for us to think about this. You see, we have the best plans. We have all of these things all enumerated. But then are changes along the way. Now let me relate one more experience here before I close this. You know, we can't travel without our passport. And you know how important that is. All right? In fact, having a U.S. passport is really, it's good. But there are some limitations, by the way. And I'm not just putting this as a warning, but U.S. passport can be really a strong, document. But then also, when you are in the wrong place, it can also be detrimental. Are you with me? If you're flying out there in the Middle East right now, and God forbid, if you're riding the plane and the plane is hijacked, and these people are looking only for those who are U.S. citizens and you are U.S. passport, right? And what happened? Well, you'll be in good hands. Not really. But anyway, talking about passport, about 3 years ago, almost 3 years now. See, I always, in my pouch, I always have that passport. I have my special, take that with us all the time. We make good of that because when we are in Moldova, by the way, you drive, they can stop you anytime and check just at random. And if you don't have your document, they'll take you a place where, they will make sure that you have that document. But anyway, I think it was Tuesday, my wife and I told her that she's going to go with me for my orthodontist appointment. So I took my bag with me. I know I have my passport there. You always. So we got to the clinic, and I think I was there for about maybe a little over an hour. Then we went home. For whatever reason, in the afternoon, I checked my bag, and I noticed there's only one passport. And my wife's passport was missing. I was just like, so I asked her, I gave you that bag while we were in the orthodontist office. Did you not? How did that happen? It was a missing passport. So I went back to the car, checked everything. There was none. Went back to the house, just checked. And I think Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, third day. Could not find it. Of course, we called the clinic. There was nothing there. And eventually, for what? And I told her, but by Friday morning, during our worship, for whatever reason why we didn't do it, well, I think we did have our prayer. But this Friday, I said, Lord, you know how we desperately need that passport. We're about to travel soon. 3 days passed, remember? And so that Friday, we kneel, Lord, please, if it is your will, I know, you know where exactly that passport is. And after we have that prayer, and we have our breakfast, and I was sitting in my recliner, a little bit relaxing, and a few minutes later, I noticed that a sheriff SUV pulled over at our side, at our house. And I thought he's going to the other side, and he was actually coming to our place. So I have to meet him. I opened the door, and the first thing he did is just like, is this the place for Matteo, for Elva? I said, yes. And then he pulled that passport. And you know, the first thing that came out from my mouth is, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. And the sheriff was looking at me, what? I said, it's a miracle. Because with that passport has been missing for 3 days. So I asked him, where did you find this? Well, somebody came to our office, and by the way, that passport, obviously, it was raining the night before, that was missing. It was raining because I noticed that the little perforation of the passport, there was some kind of, change. And then the sheriff said, a guy came to office and actually found this passport right there on that, and he pointed, there is what you call a seafood kind of restaurant. It's only 800 meters away from our place. I said, no way. I never stopped there. Never. But the sheriff said that it was found right there. And I could not believe that. 800 meters away from our place. For I know that it was somewhere over there, about 20 miles away in the office. I know it was there. But the point is this. Why am I sharing this? Because you see, God is always in the business of teaching us a lesson. All the time. To rely on Him. These tokens, whatever the case may be, is one of the things that's helping us not only to grow in grace, but that our spiritual condition will be healthy. I like that story that you have on that plane, all those enumerated things that we have to hang on. Hang on tight. There's so many of those. So this is what Jesus is really telling Nicodemus. You must be born again. Same thing with Paul. Not necessarily the same words as Nicodemus. You cannot, what? Kick against the prick. In other words, you cannot go against the will or the plan of the Lord. So the question for us today, my brothers and sisters, my fellow pilgrims, we are about to enter that heavenly Canaan. This is not going to be earthly. This is heavenly Canaan. Are you ready? Are you ready to enter? And by the way, once that will come, it's final. It's going to be final. Either you will go in or you will be out. There are only two groups. Where do you think you will be? So today we have been encouraged here to daily practice this in relationship of trusting God and giving our plans to Him. I hope and pray that for all of us, as we continue our journey in preparing for His return, that we will remain faithful through the empowerment of the Holy Spirit. And I'm very sure that when He comes, He will say, this, we can truly say that this is what we have been waiting for, our Lord and Savior. So may God bless us today, and we're going to sing this song for our closing hymn, Beneath the Cross